What's up, guys? Welcome to Vintage Genetics, where it is all about classic bodybuilding. And today we are training the legs. And the first movement we're doing is the hamstrings. Why? Because for me, the hamstrings are a weak point, and whenever you put something first in the training, that's where you're able to put most focus and most power into those movements, which is what I'm doing right now. Keep in mind, this was recorded a little bit over 2 weeks ago. So it was about 2 weeks after my Olympia. No, actually it was like 10 days after the Olympia, so it was like the second or third leg workout. So the weights I'm using here are not the weights I'm using right now. My strength actually went up quite a lot, but the exercises are still the exact same. So I'm showing it to you regardless because it's still useful to see. Okay guys, so this is a unilateral leg curl, and I'm starting with the left side because the left side I actually torn a little bit before the Olympia, about 8 weeks out. So ever since then I haven't been able to train heavy. So now I will finally start to increase the weight again, start to increase the tension again, but I don't want to risk tearing it again. So we're starting very light, making sure the range of motion is perfect, and the time and attention, of course, the form as well. So let's check it out. So yes, as I mentioned, about 8 weeks before the Olympia, I did this exact movement with the left side, and I did it with 35 kilos. Now this is, I believe, 20 kilos that I'm doing right now, 15 or 20. And because I did 35 kilos, and this is something you have to listen to very carefully, my form was off. Just because I wanted to beat my previous record. For example, I did like 8 reps of 35 kilos the workout before, and now I wanted to do 9 reps. So what do you do then? You want the first few reps to be as easy as possible, so you use explosive power right from the get-go. However, if it's the first exercise and you didn't properly warm up, and that time I didn't sleep properly either, probably didn't hydrate myself, plus I was in a caloric deficit for a while, all of those factors combined, I partially tore the outside of my left hamstring. And that is actually my weak body part and the weakest side of my body at the same time. So it was very, mentally difficult not to be able to stimulate that muscle when you know that it's the weakest muscle on your entire body right before doing the Olympia. But that did teach me a lesson. Stick to the weights that you're able to do perfect form with, like this. So it's almost half, a little bit over half of the weight that I normally do. But the moment that I notice that my body has to take on a different form so that the form wouldn't be without momentum, that's when I stop the exercise and continue with the other leg right here, as you can see. Now my right side is a bit stronger than my left side, so even though this is a working set where I did go to failure with the left leg, the right leg could still do a couple more reps. But that is the exact reason why a lot of people have a weaker side or a smaller side of the body, is that they actually go to failure with the strong side as well. So that's not what you want to do. I go to failure by at about 5 reps with that set. After that I did another set of about 10 reps with 15 kilos. It's a very lightweight, I know, but trust me, if you keep your lower body and your hips very flat on that machine, and it's actually a heavy machine, this one, then it will be extremely difficult to perform this weight with only the hamstrings. But guess what? That is what bodybuilding is all about. Making it as difficult as possible for the muscle that you're working. You don't want to use other muscles, you don't want to use momentum, you only want to use that muscle. So what we're doing, we're first starting with the unilateral laying leg curl, and then we're doing the unilateral leg extension. So what it basically is we're first doing 2 unilateral movements to warm up those muscles, isolation movements to hit the quads and the hamstrings. And I'm working out with Kane, my brother, and his girlfriend Glynis, who is doing the leg extension right there. They did the exercise with both legs at the same time because they have also a different gym that they train at, their own gym, about 45 minutes away, where I used to train myself for the first 7 years of my lifting career. So that's pretty awesome that they actually met in that gym where everything of bodybuilding started anyway. So my point is that I only have this isolation movement and the laying leg curl isolation movement, no seated or standing leg curl, for example. So I have to vary those exercises using only one leg, so I can actually rotate my exercises and motions around using the exact same machine. They can, for example, do the leg extension first, then the leg extension with plate loaded, then the laying leg curl machine, then the seated leg curl, the standing leg curl, for example. If your gym has more machines, you have more opportunities to switch around with the exercises. Anyway, so what we are doing here is we are warming up the legs before hitting the heavy compound movements. And this, by the way, is Teuntje, our dog. So we all know Bobby, he's the gym dog, but that is actually Teuntje. He is a dachshund, a sausage dog, in other words. And I have known him for about almost 10 years by now, like either 8, 9, or 10 years. So he's been with us for quite a long time. But he is living in my parental home. So that's why I know him for so long. And this is the first working set that I'm doing of these leg extensions. And that's pretty amazing to be able to go to failure here with only one leg, because then you can also start with the weak one first and then the stronger one second. And you will notice that the stronger one in this case is the right leg, but the quads are much closer together in terms of strength compared to the hamstring. So for me, especially on the side poses and the rear poses, that's where I need to improve most. But the quads in general, the wheels in general need to improve anyway. So that's why I like to go to failure on every single leg movement for at least 2 working sets. Then it is time for the hack squat, and this hack squat machine is an amazing one. We are using bands on it. These are purple bands, and now I'm actually using black bands. Those are a bit weaker in terms of the amount of help they provide at the bottom. So why would you use bands around the hack squat? Now, you young people, and I'm pretty young myself, but for the true beginners out there below 20 or around 20, you guys probably don't feel this yet, but the knees take quite a beating when you're doing quite a lot of weight on this machine. So when you can take the stress off at the very bottom, that feels incredibly amazing. So that allows me, these 2 bands allow me to go as heavy as I possibly can, go to absolute failure, use the fullest range of motion possible for me, because as you can see, I go all the way down. My calves touch my hamstrings until they are restricted in motion. Then I go back up. So I can use heavy weights, I can use full range of motion without any pain in the knees, guys. I actually made a video on my channel regarding doing the hack squats without knee pain at all, because my left knee actually did hurt a little bit starting about 2 years ago, when I did heavy back squats, heavy leg presses, heavy hack squats without knee sleeves, without weightlifting shoes, without bands. And after years and years of training like that, the joints start to take a beating, and that's not what we want. We want to beat the muscles up, and not the ligaments, not the tendons, not the joints, only the muscles. So that's why I'm using knee sleeves to help with the tension on the knees a little bit. They don't help in the actual weight you're able to lift, but they help in the tension in between the hamstring and the calf, so there's more tension there, allowing for less tension to be on the knee itself. and also weightlifting shoes, allowing me to go below parallel, so a full range of motion. Because I'm quite tall, it's hard to reach full range of motion, combined with my poor ankle flexibility, which those weightlifting shoes help with. So the elevated heels help a lot, and the bands and help shift the tension at the bottom and actually make it more difficult at the top, because then you're able to load up a bit more weight because the bottom is easier. The top is usually more easier to do if you don't have bands at all, because then it's a lot easier to lift a weight at the very top than get out of the bottom. So you can actually use quite a lot of weight on the movement, and it feels amazing on the legs, on the quads for sure. And Glynis here is actually quite strong. She also goes all the way down and all the way back up for maximum stretch on the quads. And this is quite a heavy weight, regardless whether you're male or female, because trust me, hack squats in every single gym, they are quite different from each other, but this hack squat in particular feels incredibly heavy in my opinion. I used to do a lot more weight on this hack squat machine exercise in other gyms, but this particular machine just feels extremely heavy because of the specific angle, I guess. But that's always the mystery of hack squats. Some feel incredibly heavy and some feel very light, but regardless, this one feels quite heavy. So whenever you're able to lift heavy weights on this one, you know that you're quite strong. And it's always nice to work out with other people, especially people you trust, so that they can actually spot you in a correct way and push you to do just a bit more reps beyond what you would normally do. So for those of you who do not know, the one squatting right there with the black golden era Reamer shirt available on VGNetwork.com is my brother Kane. We actually worked out together for the first 7 to 8 years, maybe even longer, of my bodybuilding career. We always made the same amount of progress in terms of strength and muscle. It's only when we started to, get girlfriends, move out of the parental house, move into different cities, that we started to work out individually, but we still maintained making progress. And that is actually where the Vintage Genetics name comes from, because both of us have the genes to pack on muscle and pack on strength, when we noticed that the rest of the gym, at least where we trained, didn't. So that's where the name really came from, and the vintage of course comes from my love for classic and golden era bodybuilding. But anyway, we are doing the hack squat here, and this is the second working set. As you can see, I control the weight on the way down, and I push up a bit more explosively, so when I go all the way down, I feel the stretch on the quads, and then I push up quite explosively to make sure I recruit all of those muscle fibers and motor units inside the muscle, because the more that are recruited, the more muscle mass will be created eventually. So this is the second working set, as I mentioned, and I use less weight here and more reps. So that means that I did the hack squat with 2 different weights and 2 different rep ranges, allowing for me to get stronger on multiple rep ranges. And this is the amount of reps and weight that I write down in my logbook on my phone. The next time that I do the hack squat, I watch my phone, I see, oh, I did 18 times 150 kilos. Next time I want to try 19 reps, and then the time after that I want to try 20 reps. And when you reach that amount of reps, then you move the weight up to 160 within the working set number 2. But with working set number 1, you have a different amount of weight and different rep range that you want to stay in between. So then you have 2 opportunities to become stronger. So even if you don't get stronger in 1 rep range, you can still give your all in the 2nd rep range and become stronger there. So you actually objectively know whether you made progress or not. So the next exercise is the leg press, and for those who do not know my way of training yet, which I do think is the most efficient way to train for bodybuilding, in my opinion, is first do a lot of, not a lot, but the necessary amount of warm-up sets. So the deeper you are into the workout, the less warm-up sets you have to do. For this leg press, for example, I only did 2 warm-up sets, and for the hack squats before, I did 4 warm-up sets. So what is a warm-up set? It's a set that you use to get acclimated to the movement, acclimated to the weight, and get some blood into the muscle to warm up the joints, the ligaments, the tendons, the muscle itself. So there's simply less chance of injury, because if you didn't have to worry about injury, you might as well start with the max weight you were able to do last time and try to improve yourself then. But that's not possible, because then you would tear something off for sure. So what we're doing is doing warm-ups until you feel that you are ready to do the working set number 1. And working set number 1 is the set that you go to failure at, and that is the only set you go to failure at unless you're doing multiple working sets. I personally do 2 working sets per exercise, because I feel like if you do more working sets than that, it might impact your overall fatigue, and if your body has to deal with all that fatigue, there won't be any energy, space, room left within the recovery to actually build muscle. So this is what they like to call the stimulus to fatigue ratio. You want the maximum stimulus with the least amount of fatigue. So what is a stimulus? That would be 1 working set, which is a stimulus for growing muscle. 2 working sets stimulate it even more. However, if you're doing 10 working sets on one exercise, you would stimulate it so much that the fatigue per working set would increase exponentially, which would actually decrease the amount of muscle you would build ultimately, because the systemic fatigue, or the overall fatigue in your entire physique, in your entire body, would be too great to overcome with your sleep and your diet and your supplementation. So that's why I like to stick to 2 working sets. The deeper you get into the off season, usually the more working sets you can do per exercise and still recover from it. But this is really different for everybody. So I will slowly increase working sets as I get further away from my Olympia prep, because that does take quite a lot of recovery. So when I feel entirely energized, which at the moment of this recording I pretty much do, that's when I start increasing the working sets. So for example, this is working set number 2. I already did my first working set. However, what I realized is that I was actually underestimating my strength. So I did more reps than I thought I could do, overshooting those 12 reps, which would normally be my limit for the first working set. So then I move to the second working set and choose a heavier weight. And with that weight, I go to failure once again, and this time I did go below those 12 reps, and that is then, I call that a day for the exercise. However, if I'm deeper into the off season, as I mentioned, I would add another working set, for example, or an intensity technique like a drop set or a cluster set or pause reps or even 21s, for example. These are all intensity techniques which increase the stimulus for muscle growth, but only if your diet, recovery, nutrition, sleep, rest, etc. are all on point. So when you see people work out extremely hard in the gym and you still see them the same muscle mass as the year before or 2 years ago, they simply don't change. Why don't they just grow infinitely then? Because they train very hard. That's because they're missing something in terms of recovery. If it was only about training as hard as possible, we would all be quite big, because we all like to train very hard and go to failure as many times as possible, train every day of the week, and it can go on like that. But that doesn't happen, because then recovery can't keep up with the amount of stimulus we're giving to our muscles, and the fatigue will be too great, and muscle won't be built because your body is already busy just fixing your damage on your overall body instead of just the muscle accrual that you would get from a workout session like this. But anyway, On the leg press, what you want to do is go all the way down, at least to parallel, until you feel a very good stretch on the quads, and then go all the way up, keeping the tension on the quads, because one of the aspects of bodybuilding is also time under tension. Every time you lose tension, that's when you lose the opportunity to build the maximum amount of muscle. And then the last exercise of this particular video, the Romanian deadlift with the dumbbells. I actually included Romanian deadlifts and stiff leg deadlifts as a staple in my workouts right now, because what I simply need to grow is the glutes and the hamstrings from the back. Also the adductors. I realize that for sure the inner thighs have to be thicker as well, but those will become thicker by using full range of motion exercises like the hack squat you saw before. Science and a lot of literature has already shown that when you use full range of motion, go as deep as you possibly can, that's when you also hit the adductors quite a lot. So doing slightly wider stance squats also hits those. Doesn't matter what kind of squats, can be Smith machine squats, can be hack squats, can be my favorite belt squat. Whatever squat it is, as long as you stand, shoulder width or wider and go all the way down, you will hit those inner thighs. But to hit those hamstrings, it's not just about going all the way down on either squat or leg press, because that's not a good hamstring builder. What is a good hamstring builder is the laying leg hold we did before, and hip hinge exercises like this one, the Romanian deadlift with the dumbbell. Unfortunately, this is the last set we were able to record because the battery died, and after this I did another set to failure on these Romanian deadlifts, and after this we did some calves as well. Actually, we did the calves on the leg press because it was still loaded up with weights. We did a kind of a standing calf raise with simply a straight-legged calf press, I like to call it, and go to failure on that one. But this one is truly an amazing movement to get some thickness in the hamstrings, to make sure that my back poses look a whole lot better next time that I'm on stage. Anyway guys, a lot more videos are coming, and one video that has been in the making for a while, a Q&A is coming. So if you want any questions to be answered, make sure to ask them down below, and I will answer them as quickly and well as possible in the next Q&A. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to stay golden.